Get some reaction from the White House to all of that tonight. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, joins me now. Kellyanne, thank you for being here. Good to see you tonight.
Hi, Martha.
So what's your response to those reports, first of all, that the president is concerned about a head-to-head matchup with Joe Biden because he is popular in some of those Rust Belt states?
I'm sure that's being pushed forward by the Biden people, just like it was being pushed by the Bloomberg people on $551 million worth of paid advertising, Martha, that Donald Trump fears Mike Bloomberg, he fears Joe Biden. The fact is, the president has said clearly, and I was just with him moments ago, that it doesn't matter who he runs against, because they have to run against the Trump economy, the Trump record on national security and terrorism, the Trump record on nearly 200 federal judges confirmed to the courts, the Trump record on these trade deals. This nonsense that President Trump wouldn't want to face Joe Biden in the Rust Belt states that were decimated by the Obama-Biden policies on manufacturing, on trade, on the economy, that's all been roaring back because of the Trump-Pence agenda. And the fact is that Joe Biden is not a high-energy candidate, but he still is a high-risk candidate. There's a reason that the mainstream media, and there's a reason the other Democrats were chomping and stomping all over him because he had receded out of view. And
now the focus
coming back, but he still is highly flawed. I think he's Hillary all over again. I think Joe Biden is Hillary 2.0.
He could be. We will see. But it is interesting. Obviously, when you're looking at your potential opponents and you're sizing them up, you're obviously having conversations about how you would sort of go after each one of them. You know, the backdrop of the economy is what it is, and it's a positive for the president. But you look at both of these candidates and you sort of size them up. And what the president has done a lot of lately is sort of talk about how Bernie Sanders isn't getting a fair shake and they're doing it all over again to him, which makes people read into that and say, it sounds like he would love to run against Bernie Sanders.
No, the read into that is much simpler. It's that the president knows how it feels to have the entire establishment, all the king's horses, all the king's men, and their money against you as a candidate, as the outsider, as the person who wants to shake it up. So in that way, the Trump's solid, intractable, loyal base and Bernie's base are similar. Trump's obviously is much wider, bigger, and deeper, and he's the president, and Bernie won't be. But there's a difference here. Bernie's a socialist, and the president is a free market capitalist who's presided over the greatest economy of our lifetime. So that's the fundamental ideological difference. But the president knows what it's like to be shunned by the establishment.
Well, that's true. There have been a lot of parallels that have been drawn when you look at the huge group of people that Bernie Sanders has been running against and what happened back in 2015. I want to let me just get to the point that you were just making about the broadening of President Trump's base. And here's a look at the African American vote in 2016. Hillary Clinton won 89% and President Trump won 8%. And we saw, one of the characteristics of last night was just a lot of strength across many states that Joe Biden had in terms of African American support. So how do you approach that as a counselor to the president going into the election?
Sure. Well, the way the presidents get elected, reelected or not, is by what they do in the building behind me. And this president has done more for the African American community, frankly, for all Americans, than any modern president. For African Americans, that includes the lowest unemployment rate. It includes hundreds of thousands of new jobs for them. It includes criminal justice reform. It includes breaking the back of the opioid and drug crisis. Again, that's an indiscriminate crisis. It affects everyone, but the solutions affect everyone too. This president also, through his opportunity zones, through his work on home ownership. I attended the Latino Coalition, the speech the president gave a couple of blocks away from here today, and he got a great reception from the Latino Coalition. Why? Because the small business ownership is way up among Hispanic Americans. Home ownership, 600,000 Latinas have new jobs because of this president. The unemployment rate for them is also low. So the president has to go out there and talk about his record. And I think the president can easily double his number among African Americans. 8% can become 16% because of all the great work he has done within those communities.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, I think, to watch play out. I think that's going to be one of the most interesting aspects, to see if President Trump can grow that in terms of his vote with African Americans, also with Latinos. So that's something we're going to watch very closely. Here's the president arguing that Joe Biden is further left than Bernie Sanders. Watch this.
They don't like Joe either. Joe's become, a lot of people are with Joe. If you look at those people, they're worse than Bernie in terms of being radical left. Some of Joe's handlers are further left than Bernie.
How so, specifically?
Well, some are. I mean, I think Joe Biden has two problems here. The Sanders people
But who
think
is he
he's too far
referring
to the
to when he
right.
says some of his handlers are further left than Bernie
He's
Sanders?
referring to, but why would I give them a name? I'm not playing that game. But what the president is also saying is, when in the world do we start calling people moderates who want to grab your guns, who are for abortion the 10th month, who want to raise taxes on everybody, who weren't there to renegotiate great trade deals the way this president has done, who never stood up to China? In fact, the only thing that we've heard about Biden and China of late is all the money his son got out of China. Didn't stand up against the Iran nuclear deal. It's this president didn't for 35, 40 years in government, including 8 here in this White House. Martha never made good on the Obama-Biden promise to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I mean, all these different things that we have done by implication mean the Obama-Biden administration never did. And so he is, I think that Biden's going to have an ideological problem. But look, Biden, I said he's like Hillary. This is important because I was there. He's like Hillary in many ways in that he has 100% name ID, a long record, thin on accomplishments, and he's going to have to take 5 days off the trail to juice himself up and get all ready for those debates against Donald Trump. Nobody wants to see Joe Biden debate Donald Trump, particularly on the issues and on the record.
Well, you know, it's fascinating to hear, you know, sort of how the arguments shape up going into that and how you sort of aim at Joe Biden in some of those ways, and we're going to hear those flesh out as we go through this. You just mentioned Hunter Biden. You just mentioned Joe Biden's son, and I'm wondering, you know, the discussion on that sort of leveled off a little bit, I think, when it looked like Joe Biden was not going to be the nominee. Can we expect that we're going to hear a lot more about investigations into the Biden family, into Burisma, and all of that once again?
Well, we don't run investigations here out of the White House like that. The Congress does, I guess.
But the president spoke about wanting those investigations, so that's what I mean.
Martha, this is not picking on somebody's kids. We certainly know what that's all about in the Trump White House, don't we? But this is about, I mentioned Hunter Biden in the context of China, because all we've heard about of Biden and China of late is the billions of dollars that I guess his son got in business deals there. The Ukraine issue has not been resolved. There's a reason the Democrats were talking about Ukraine, vomited every other word out of their mouth was Ukraine for months, and now don't want to talk about. There's a reason that nobody wants to talk about the Biden brothers
so I'm
deals
hearing yes.
in Iraq. No, I think people are always concerned about what people do when they're in government. What are they doing with their position? And so I think Joe Biden gets beaten just by looking at Joe Biden's record. There's a reason that Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and, yes, Michael Bloomberg for a fleeting moment were the saviors because Biden was no longer, quote, electable or even delectable to the Democratic primary voters. Don't forget, he still has all the issues he had before. But I think the biggest question for Joe Biden is about Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden. It's this.
Okay, but I mean, the president said we should investigate China, and you just brought it up. So I'm just wondering, because we want to see sort of what the themes are going to be as they match up, and it sounds like there will be an effort to bring that up again.
The major theme of Joe Biden is that he can't beat the Trump record on the economy, on trade deals, on bringing manufacturing back, on killing these terrorists that the Obama-Biden people could have killed, on getting these judges who respect the Constitution, don't think it's a paper towel, onto the federal courts, and most importantly, Joe Biden, stop telling us what you're going to do if you're elected president. You did nothing for 40 years that was meaningful enough.
I hear you, and it's going to be fascinating. So, Kellyanne, thank you. Good to have you here tonight, as always.
Thanks, Martha.